this rubberstamp.io webinar. Webinar is just kind of like a amateur TV show where we get to show you how to use the product, and what we try and do is explain how the product works. But today we have something very special going on. Before I get into that, let me just explain who I am. My name is James Kennedy. I'm the CEO and partner manager at Rubberstamp. I'm talking to you from our offices in South Africa, where most of the team are based. And today's webinar is going to take about hopefully just less than half an hour. And rather than a general introduction to Rubberstamp, what we're actually going to do is give you a very specific introduction on how to use Rubberstamp in a specific sector, which is in the construction industry. So I'd just like to introduce Stefan Illich, who I'll hand over to in a couple of minutes here. Stefan has been easily one of our most successful users at Rubberstamp. He came in as a kind of ordinary quote-unquote user about a year ago now, and he's really found ways to get the very most from Rubberstamp. He's a very impressive character. He has a lot of experience working in general contractors in using Rubberstamp to the most, both for cost control as well as estimating future project costs and so on, which is why I'm very excited to share what he has here today. So just before I hand over to Stefan, maybe I'll just do that now. Stefan, can you hear us? Is that a fair introduction? What have I missed out there?
Thank you very much. No, that was quite good. Nothing but the drum roll.
I can do the drum roll.
Welcome to our first webinar. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, James, for the lovely introduction. I think you did a great job introducing it so far. So just like James said, we're going to take a quick look at how to use Rubberstamp in a construction environment. So what I'm going to try to do is give you a high-level overview of some of the main features that you can work in once you get it up and running. And then if we have time and we don't dilly-dally too long, I'm also going to take the time to show you how quickly you can set up a new project or a new company on Rubberstamp. So first, before I get too far into Rubberstamp, I want to go through a couple of things regarding general construction. I know that most of us here should probably be in the construction industry, but for the sake of those who aren't, we'll go over a couple of things, including procurement types, just quickly define purchase orders and contracts. We'll go over pricing models and the difference between getting pricing from suppliers and contractors. We're going to talk about purchase tracking, which will lead us into Rubberstamp. Purchase tracking, we're going to talk about what we write down when we track purchases and why we do, and what some example processes are. Then we're going to talk about different tracking systems, mainly electronic versus paper-based. And then we'll jump into the demo with Rubberstamp. So one thing I'll go over when we do get to Rubberstamp is not only what the intended uses were, but as James was sort of alluding to there, there's been some kind of fringe benefits that we've run into as we've developed the system, as we've implemented it, and we've realized that the capabilities are there for some more things, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on here. So let's start with procurement. So there's two main types of procurement: purchase orders and contracts. Purchase orders are generally used for smaller cost items, for one-off, non-repetitive items. And we generally use contracts whenever items or services are going to cost a lot of money, or they're going to be repetitive, or we're going to use them all the time. It establishes a better relationship with the contractors, and it allows everybody to know the terms. Another good time to use purchase orders is when this scope is not necessarily known. So there's also open purchase orders, which is essentially when you give a number or a reference code, but you don't specify a scope or item or closing date. And we're not going to talk about that too much because although it's still called a purchase order, I don't think it is really tracking anything. It's pretty much just attaching a reference code to a purchase at a certain time. All right, so pricing models. Now, the two main types that I've alluded to before, there's from suppliers and from contractors. Now, the difference between those two are going to be the pricing you get from suppliers. You can get fixed price lists, which we'll talk about using and implementing in Rubber Stamp later. But the benefit of this is you can have a list of products that is more or less fixed, and a list of prices that may change with time, but will be relatively stable. Stable enough that you could take the time to input it into a small spreadsheet and upload it into Rubber Stamp. I'll show you how to do that later, but one of the features that makes electronic purchase tracking that much better than paper-based is you can store a database of your products and prices so that you're not entering different prices for the same product, and also so that you can compare across projects or across purchasers if everybody's paying the same price at an easy glance from a report you can export. The next thing I wanted to talk about was how do we get our pricing? And there's a couple of things that influence our pricing, and that's how much we purchase and who we purchase from. So those of us in construction know that the more you buy, I mean, in almost any industry, the more you buy, the better prices you're going to get. The longer you've been buying from a certain vendor, the better prices you're going to get. So it's important to work on those purchasing relationships while you're developing your tracking system. Although it's not directly related to the tracking, it's an important component of purchasing as a whole. Another type is, I don't know if we have any friends here with us from America, but in the States, they use something called master service agreements for supplier pricing as well as contractor. So that's something to be aware of. It's something like a contract for a supplier. So it's really quite a beneficial thing. And actually, we have some colleagues in our company who are working out of the States now, and we're actually working on implementing something like that up here in Canada as well. I may have glossed over that. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia. For those of you who are wondering, yes, it is raining. Contractor pricing is not as easy to predict as supplier pricing. With contractors, we can upload rate sheets, hourly rate sheets, and costs per certain labor type. However, it's hard for us to narrow down a fixed list of products. So that's often when you're going to want to use a flexible list. Into purchase tracking. So why do we track purchases? Well, importantly, so that we don't pay invoices which we shouldn't, or we pay the right amount on invoices. And so that we can also track what it took to build the project when we wanted to do it. So verification of the order is to ensure that it was ordered, and in fact, the order was what we wanted. And verification of the pricing, which is making sure that the price is being charged what we agreed to when we first purchased it. The two types of systems, as I said before, we can have an electronic or a software-based system like Rubber Stamp, and a few others. The benefits include being cloud-based. I can't stress enough how important that is to have everybody on the same version of a file at the same time. So in construction specifically, the people who are writing purchase orders are your superintendents. And if you have 6 projects on the go, you have 6 different sites from which purchase orders are coming into the office. And then you have maybe 2 or 3 people in the office who review those purchase orders, match them to invoices, and approve them. It is infinitely important that everybody has the same information at the same time. And that's got to be the most major downfall of paper-based tracking systems, is that it is not updatable. And the logistics are the worst part about it, because from all those 6 sites, all those paper purchase orders need to make it back to your head office, and then some poor coordinator has to match them all up to the invoices that come in. Not helpful. Lots of time wasted there. Before I implemented Rubber Stamp, our construction coordinator, as we called her, all she did was match purchase orders to invoices, about 30 hours a week. This was the main focus of her job. And after getting Rubber Stamp implemented and adding a couple of new processes, which I will show you about when we do the demo, we've managed to reduce that to less than 10 hours a week. So she's since then been able to focus more on learning technical construction skills, and that was nearly a year ago, and she's recently also been promoted, and now she's helping out on projects. And we have a new coordinator. So the other major benefit of the electronic system is the database of information. Now, I'll talk about data again, but data is what we need for future jobs, for tracking the health and progress of current jobs. You'll be amazed at all the information you have when you can see all your purchase orders in one place. So I'll go over a little bit what I had to do to get the system in. So the first thing I did was take a look at how are we doing things currently. So I put a little brief flow chart together to give you an overview of the cycle as it works in my company. So it generally starts with somebody placing an order with a supplier. That person, the superintendent usually, gives a PO number and fills in the information on their paper sheet. This is prior to rubber stamp. The supplier ships out the material and invoices us at head office. What happens in between there? Nothing for a while. Eventually, the invoice makes it to head office and the material makes it to site. And at some point before then, the purchase order needs to make it from site to head office, and the coordinator needs to put it together. So once a coordinator has all those POs and the supplier invoices in two big stacks, she needs to go through them and match the numbers together. Now, there's often problems with numbers not being written on invoices. The number written on the invoices is maybe wrong, or there's a typo, or the information on the purchase order doesn't encompass everything on the invoice. So we're constantly going back and redoing and redoing and reviewing invoices and purchase orders. So once that's all said and done and things make it through, the purchase order matches the invoice and it's stapled together and it gets to the project manager, then he initials it, signs it off to the vice president, he initials it, and then it's off to be paid. Now, major problem with this, going back and forth over invoices again and again means big delays with paying suppliers. And when you're not paying suppliers on time or contractors, you don't continue to foster that purchasing relationship, and you don't get things on time, and you don't have any, they won't want to do any favors because you're not doing them any favors. So once we establish that we've got a problem, we try to figure out what we need. And some of the things that I wanted from it was a database. I wanted information. So for me, it was obvious that we were going software and not some other manual purchasing system. From a project planning perspective, the number one most important step and the number one cause of project failure is not identifying every and last one of your stakeholders early on in the project. Identifying them, but also engaging with them. Find out everybody who's going to use and be affected by this and get them on board. Show them what it's going to do. Ask them what they need it to do before you get too deep into anything. Make sure everybody's involved, because that's the best way you can make the most out of your new system. And then identifying the risks and constraints. What are we risking here? How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to use? What technical skills do we need to implement it? So we did a quick my company evaluation of purchasing versus building a software. Looked around for a program that met all those requirements that we defined, and I was able to find one. So, and that one was rubber stamp. And I did look at a couple different ones, and they just didn't meet my needs. One of the things that attracted us to rubber stamp was having my superintendents go from writing triplicate purchase orders to using an app on their phone or on their desktop was a challenge. And what I wanted to ensure was that I didn't give them a software that was too complex or daunting. And you'll see soon, and when you get a chance to do your own trial and your own demo, that the app is really basic, lean, and streamlined. It allows you to get what you need done quickly without overwhelming you with information or fields to fill out. And the desktop function is even more streamlined. It's quick, it's easy to enter, and it keeps all your information in the same place. So once we were done that, created an implementation plan. I did a phased structure because I had a couple of projects on the go. So I did a test run on an open project, and then I did full handovers. Once each project terminated, at the start of the next project, I got that team on board. Now, I have since learned that that wasn't necessary. I could have made the full transition quite simply right away. But when you're first starting out, you don't necessarily know what all the impacts are going to be. So just make sure that you talk about it with your team and create a plan that works best for you and your company. So what came out of it? Budget tracking and quantity tracking are the two main things that Rubber Stamp delivers for me and at Amicon. Budget tracking in the sense that what we do in Rubber Stamp is when purchase orders are written, we attach them directly to cost codes. Now, those budgets and cost codes are preloaded into the system. So when a user is typing in a item, a service, or a product, they just attach each line item to the certain cost code that needs to be attributed to. This made our life a lot easier because it skipped a step for us in head office. Rather than doing that manually later on, it's automatically filed here. And being that it's automatically filed, it also gives us reports that I can print out at the click of a button that show me how far along we are in each cost code on every project at any given time. So that was a major thing I didn't see coming. The second is the supplier database. Rubber Stamp automatically logs all the suppliers you enter. Each new supplier gets added into the database, and it keeps track of the statistics, how often you use that supplier, how much money you spend with them, what are the products you buy, and what price you pay for those products. So that was a fantastic place to keep that. And also, I just touched on pricing and products and how that is contained within the supplier database as well. Searchability is a huge function. If you ever need to find a purchase order, and those of you who have ever had to look for a purchase order to match an invoice from a couple of months ago will know how hard it is. And go back even further than that, now you're looking at archive boxes. It's nearly impossible to find the paper purchasing order. What you want is a system that you open your computer, you type in the number, or you type in the keyword, or you type in the supplier name, and you'll pull up every purchase order that was written in that time. And it makes it much easier to sift through. It's interactive. It has a function for attaching files. So we can attach quotes, we can attach photographs, we can add comments and have a conversation back and forth between the superintendent and the coordinator in the office on one platform where it's all date and time stamped and kept track of. We also have functions for marking items as received. So the superintendent can go back, and once he gets his order of 2x4s, he can go and click in there and mark that he has received them all. Or he can mark that he's only received the first half and leave a note that the second half is expected tomorrow. Really important when the supplier is going to bill for everything, and maybe that second half never makes it to site. So this is an important tracking method that we like to use. What were some of the challenges? Well, we thought that IT was going to be a big challenge. We thought that having the right hardware and learning the software was going to be a challenge. It proved that, and the system has gotten so flexible since I've been using it. It really has grown, and kudos to James and his team for that. The app on iPhone is so native and so streamlined that there wasn't an issue at all. So any version of iPhone can run it, and they have an app under Android, under Google Play as well. So nearly every phone is covered. Unfortunately, if you're still hanging onto your BlackBerry, you do not have an app. Getting everybody to buy in. Now, this was the first challenge for me because I knew, and my superintendents knew, that we needed this team. But convincing our accounting team and the vice president in charge took a little bit of work. We had to put together a little bit of a presentation explaining to them why this is going to save us time and money and what benefits it's going to bring us that we can't even quantify. Training turned out to be a breeze. I thought it might be daunting. It really wasn't. It takes me about 20 minutes to set up and teach a new user how to use Rubber Stamp. And I can do it via a Google Hangout like this, a Meet, or in person over coffee. Things came out of it that we didn't expect. Quantity tracking. So one feature, as James alluded to earlier, that we've been working together to make Rubber Stamp specific to the construction industry and some of the features that it can deliver is quantity tracking. So I noticed that in every single line item, we have a quantity field, but it wasn't coming out on the purchase order report. So one quick phone call to James and he said, yeah, no problem. We can add that to the report. So now the report has an extra sheet that shows you all the quantities. So how do I use this? So before the job, generally we perform takeoffs. And I'll do a takeoff on a wood frame building on all the lumber, on all the siding material, how much roofing material there is, anything that I'm going to be paying for in part or in whole without a contract. On a tower, it's going to be concrete, and it's always concrete. And that's my biggest indicator on how far along we are. So how do I use this to make sure that my project health is being tracked? Well, here's a quick glimpse. Say that we're halfway through a project. It's halfway mark via schedule, and it looks like the project's about halfway done. And I want to look at my concrete budget, and I want to look at my concrete takeoff. So from Rubber Stamp, I will know how many cubic meters of concrete I've poured to date as of that very morning. But I'll also know how I'm doing on the concrete cost code budget. So if I've poured half the concrete and that's tracking okay, but I've already spent 60% of the budget, then I know that I'm tracking to go over. And I know that early on. And I can look at trends like that 20% of the way into the project or 30% of the way into the project. It was a huge improvement based on our traditional method, which was waiting for our job cost report to be issued by accounting, and which didn't include quantities and was 2 months behind. By the time the billing cycles came through, the information was at least 60 days outdated. So verifying that, using it against the original estimate to see how far along in the project you are is a huge benefit. The other one is predicting future projects. Using that information, we'll have much better data in order to predict future job costs. Also, project statistics come out being more accurate, more detailed, and you can really dive into each specific category and find out where we did well, where we need improvement. The list of products, knowing what products you buy and what price you pay for them, and being able to export that was huge. We've set up monthly review meetings to make sure that our pricing is in line, and now we have trends and we can watch where our pricing is going. So for example, I can graph how our price of lumber has changed over the last year, how our price of concrete has changed. And we can watch that so that I'm really well informed when I go to sit down with the supplier and have a chat with them about next year's pricing. And data. And that's what I keep telling you is there's no limit to what you can do with the data. Having it is the first step. Once you have it, then you'll see that there's no limit to the information that you can pull out of it. Great. So I think we have a little bit of time here. What I'd like to do is show you really quickly how to set up a new company. Hopefully that I'm going to be able to go directly from here straight into it. Bear with me for just a moment.
Yeah, while you're setting that up, I'll just say that it's pretty impressive what you've done with this. And I also appreciate that you've braved the rain today to give us this. Obviously, I asked in Ireland, where I'm from, if it rains, no one does any work. But they're obviously made of tougher things in Canada.
We wouldn't get anything done if we didn't. So from this screen, now I'll just walk you through what I've done. So from this screen, I've already got a company set up. So I'm creating a new company from already being logged in. The screen would look almost the same, except you would create your own email address just one step prior to this. Once you've created your email address, it will take you to a blank company just like this. This is your dashboard. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set up a project. So if I go under company settings and I go under company, what I do, the first thing before I start doing anything, is I change my name for department to project and budget to cost code. That makes more sense for me, and that'll actually change the name up here. And you'll see that in just a moment. You see how that's changed to cost codes now? Those aliases make more sense from a construction standpoint. So we click on the project tab up here under the company settings. We're going to click add a project. We're going to build Rubber Stamp's new headquarters. Now we're going to attach just the sample budget and my own user to this project. That's all you need to do to start a new project. Under new purchase order now, I have Rubber Stamp's new office. Now, when we're doing our projects, we're going to want a couple of more things. We're going to want different cost codes that we can attribute to. So an important tool that I use here is to import a cost code. Now, you can add them one at a time, but generally we already have a pre-made list. Now, I actually haven't created a list because I wanted to show you how easy it is to get yours into the import template. So I've just clicked import template here, and that opens Excel. So now I have this sheet here with headings. Just auto fit. This sheet here that has headings, and those tell me the categories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a couple of sample ones. So I'm going to type in concrete, lumber, rebar, mechanical, electrical, and masonry. Now your list can be as long or as short as you want it to. In the cost code, you're going to want to enter the code, the GL code that your accountants use. If you don't know what that is, maybe talk to them about it. And if you do all your coding, you may already have these numbers. Now for me, those are 5-digit numbers. So concrete is 14010, lumber is 12220, rebar is 130010. Yeah, I do this a lot, right? 016010 and 18010. Now, an important thing that you can see here, each of these codes are going to be attributed specifically to this project. So what I do to keep my codes separate when I'm online is I concatenate them, or I add to the end as a suffix to all the descriptions a project job code. And usually for me, that's a 5-digit number. So I'll just add that in as 99999 for the example here. The next heading there is the cost types. The cost type can be used if you want to further group these costs. Now, as of yet, I haven't decided a way to use this in construction, so I don't have any examples to give you. But if you guys think of anything, please do let me know, because I'm looking for ways to further clarify things like that. So let's set our budget. So let's set 50,000. We're going to do a nice little small project. Let's have 50,000 for concrete, 100 for lumber, 20,000 for rebar, 1,000 and 40. The department is going to be Rubber Stamp's new office. Now, if you're importing it on your own, important to write it as the project is written. But the team over at Rubber Stamp can help you out with any of this. If you don't feel quite confident filling these out yourself and importing them, feel free to give them a call, and they'll be happy to set you up with it. So that's all the information we need in order to upload it. So I'll click save here. I'll make sure that it's on my desktop so I can find it nice and quickly. And we'll save. And that's all we need to do on the Excel. So I've just clicked here, choose file, and I can see it here on my desktop. open, and upload. And that's it. All the cost codes are here. So now I can go into new purchase order, rubber stamps new office. And this is the default template for a purchase order. Has the supplier tab, description for each line item, and your cost codes right here. Now, you select a cost code and it can show you the remaining budget amount right away. Gives you a good indicator before you even write the purchase order of how you're doing. Gives you a snapshot into what you're doing and constantly reminds you to think of the numbers, which we know that you can't manage what you don't measure. So keep an eye on it, use it as a resource and as a reference. So we're gonna write a quick little purchase order. So around here, we like to use Lafarge. I'm gonna create them as a new supplier, Lafarge Concrete. We're gonna do test Lafarge. Okay, I'm gonna send myself the email here. And we'll put down Sarah as the contact. And that's about all the information you need to put in order to go forward. So let's see if we can do this. So what I've done actually is split out on my company's file is added a SKU number here. And in the SKU or the item number, I type in the mix code and then it predicts the rest of it. So we want to order a 35 MPA, 1-4 air, and regular ag. So I'm not going to write anything. What I would do is just write into my SKU bin RMX 30 GG 35 A1 AV. RMX G. It pops up with a predictive dropdown, which I can't show you now because we don't have any products written. But what it'll do is pop you down a drop-down list that you can click on, and then it will pre-fill the rest of these amounts, including the price per meter, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go back and set the default tax rate, 5% in the company settings. I'll show you how to do that. And then to create a new item, it's as easy as just pressing tab, and a new item pops up. Close that. Down here, we have a box for optional approvers, which we don't need to use at this point. But I can click on it, and it will send the purchase order to me prior to approving it and giving me the option to send to the supplier. Here is a little spot where we can drop in files. So if you have a quote or photographs you want to attach to it, and any notes you want to write in. All right, and then we just click send. And that will send it up to the server. So see, it's been self-approved because my purchaser has the limit amount allowable to approve a purchase order at this cost. And now we show PO number, project, supplier, and everything is logged in here. And this is the option where we can attach comments. So these are internal. Comments and files attached here don't go out with the purchase order. Let me show you an example of what the purchase order looks like. See that from this PDF right here. And what you can do is customize it. So you can add whatever fields you want here and at the line items. And if these categories aren't what you're looking for, you can add them. You can change them. You can add an item number or SKU like I did. And I've added our company logo up into the top corner, as well as a footnote. And I did allude to that earlier in terms of what processes I implemented along with this, where I require suppliers to attach this purchase order directly to the invoice prior to sending their invoice in. Now, if you do if you receive electronic invoices, they can email the PDF right together with it, or they can make it into one PDF with their invoice. If you do hard copies, they can print it out, staple it together, and mail it to you. This has reduced greatly the amount of hours that our coordinator does. So that's probably the single most valued item, if I go by cost that I can touch, is the time that we got back from our coordinator. Now, because this is a trial setup that I've set up under a new company and not the full version, the orange button's actually missing. But right on top of here, right on top of receiving items, there's a button called Send to Supplier. And that's what we click. One click, a dialog box comes up, and it pre-fills the email address for that supplier, and then you have the option to send. This is the receiving items feature that I talked about. And so you can mark what quantity you've received, when you've received it, and any comments you want to add. And when you update that, it will actually add it to this list right here. So anybody in the office or the purchase order writer can track this and see the history and see how it's been. Now, if you're also going to integrate with accounting, and Rubber Stamp is currently in progress or almost integrated with several accounting softwares, QuickBooks, FreshBooks, etc., through a program called Zapier. You can use the market paid feature even without accounting integration if you just want to keep track of which purchase orders are paid or not. Our coordinator actually does use it. We mark things as paid and the dates so that when vendors are calling her regarding checks and check dates, she has a way to figure that out. You can also leave comments like that right here on the purchase order and say, if invoice received by, check date, this. So that's how easy it is to set up a new project. Now, there's many more things that you could go into and do, and I have certainly customized mine, and I've certainly worked on customizing the reports I receive, but we can get into that at a later date, and hopefully you guys will join us at a future webinar, and we'll dive into one of those topics and show you guys how to go a little bit further here. So I'll hand the reins back to James. And thank you everybody for coming, and sorry for going a little bit over time here.
Sure, thanks, thanks, Steph. That was awesome. That was really amazing. It was great to see how quickly you could set up that project and get it up and running. I know we have a number of people on the call today who are actually in the construction industry. I'm sure Stefan would, you know, if you're willing, if you want to get on a call with Stefan and explain, go into the detail of this or go over it in more detail, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that for you. Just what remains for me to say is thanks, Stefan, very much for A, being a great customer, B, really, you know, it blows my mind to see what you're doing with the product, delivering such value to your organization, and thanks for everyone for attending.
Thank you, James.
Okay, thanks guys, bye-bye.